Time is critical. Appreciate you coming and being part of our critical minerals elements working group here as part of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. We've talked a lot about the resource itself, but one important part of that is the human resources necessary. We know all know that once you get the minerals out of the ground, you have to use some hard work to do that, as well as processing those minerals and then finding their way through the rest of the value chain. So there's a lot as we talk to folks across the spectrum about technology and workforce, and I look forward to getting your thoughts and ideas about what we can do here in the United States. We know the technological opportunities that we have here. As we have traveled around the world, what we have seen is that there are some other countries that have also some interesting technologies, but a lot of other countries too that have lots of interest in common with the United States. So what we want to do is to make sure we understand what capability we have, where we can share technologies, where we can look at lessons learned in other countries, things that they've done to advance technologies. And I know that our university programs have a tremendous amount to offer, even though we haven't expressed as much interest in mining in the United States in years past. I think that has to change. So our universities would be at the forefront of what you all know, not only in your research, but also I'm sure you've looked at what's happening around the world with those sorts of technologies and what we do within that realm. I know too that folks in the labor force, especially our labor unions, know the incredibly important element of the human resource there, the things that we have to do to make sure we operationalize their talents. As much as we look at AI and quantum computing and the advances in technology there, I tell folks that the 10 most useful tools that our young folks have that sometimes they don't realize are the most important tools that they have on the road to success, whatever career they choose, are these. Today, people that work with their hands are in need. AI and quantum computing will never replace those. People that are talented with their hands, those are experiential learners, are incredibly important for the things that we need going forward. And I would argue that our supply chain is going to require more and more of these great tools to be used on a daily basis. And the question is how do we operationalize that? How do we make sure, too, that technology lets us do more with these than what they have in the past? So I appreciate what you all do and your expertise, especially, too, on the research and development side. And, there are a number of initiatives that have been undertaken by the Congress. One such initiative is H.R. 2685, the Mining Schools Act of 2023. And this requires DOE, in coordination with the Department of Interior, to establish a grant program supporting domestic mining education, something we have been behind on through the years. We think those grants to our mining schools give us that human capital that we need going forward, something that today we are lacking. We also want to bolster the National Science Foundation. Back in my younger years, I did a lot of work with NSF. In fact, as a student, I did a lot of work under NSF grants, including going to places like Antarctica to do some research there. So pretty neat. The National Science and Technology Council, also an important part of that. So I look favorably in my days when I was a researcher and a student researcher and doing some undergraduate research and things we did, and now know how important that is. And the NSF funding opportunities are certainly there at the forefront. I think that we're up for these challenges. The key is how do we make sure we identify those? How do we make sure we put the right things in place for our federal government to do? What do we do to enable our universities? What do we do to enable our workforce? What do we do to make sure we are either helping or getting out of the way? Sometimes the latter can be the more immediate way that we can help. So with that, I'd like to turn to my colleague, Representative Kathy Castor from the great state of Florida, and turn it over to her. So Kathy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Rep. Wittman. Thank you for being here and welcome. This is the fifth meeting of the Bipartisan Critical Minerals Working Group, kind of an offshoot of the Select Committee to counter the Chinese Communist Party. And we're really focused on lifting our national security, our economic competitiveness. And when it comes to critical minerals, we know that technology is changing, that we must do more. This is kind of a truly bipartisan interest in what we can do to bolster our national security and make sure that we have the tools necessary for the clean energy economy moving forward. I know that I've looked at some of the stats. They're not great for careers here. We know unemployment's low, demographics are changing in America, and there are workforce challenges across the economy, but we need to be smart. So the Congress is interested in what we can do from a policy perspective to help bolster this important part of the workforce. I understand, according to McKinsey, more than half the current domestic mining workforce will be retired or replaced by 2029. That number stands in stark contrast to the total of just 327 degrees awarded in 2020 in mining and mineral engineering, and a 39% net drop in graduations in the U.S. since 2016. We know through the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law, the calls on skilled workforce, we've tried to put policies in place to make that meaningful, but still training that workforce is a challenge. We want to think creatively here, so really think outside the box. What else should we be doing in collaboration with our allies and partners across the world? We can leverage Fulbright scholarships, Pell Grants, other loan repayment initiatives. Would those work? What do you think? We're counting on you to give us some good ideas that we can turn into legislative proposals and move forward. So thank you.
Yeah. Kathy, thank you. We also have another one of our members today, Representative Richard Torres in the great state of New York. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your interest in this. So our committee members on the select committee very, very focused on this. I'd like to go to our witnesses now. I'd like to give you a proper introduction. We have with us Dr. Elizabeth Holley, who's an assistant professor of mining engineering at the Colorado School of Mines. She will share insights with us from Mines collaboration with the federal government to enhance the American workforce. We also have with us Dr. Barbara Arnold, who's the undergraduate program chair of mining and engineering and professor of practice in mining engineering at Penn State University. Go Nittany Lions. She will discuss Penn State's programs to improve American workforce capabilities. And by the way, my chief of staff required that I say that. She is a devout Nittany Lions fan, lots of Penn State connections there. So we also have Miss Anna Fendley, who's the Director of Regulatory and State Policy at the United Steelworkers. She'll discuss the perspective of American mine workers. So I'd like to thank our witnesses today, and I will turn the floor over, beginning with Dr. Holley. So,
Thank you, Congressman Wittman, Congresswoman Castor, and members of the working group for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm an associate professor of mining engineering at Colorado School of Mines. I'm a geologist, and I lead an NSF-funded interdisciplinary research team focused on responsible domestic production of critical minerals. Our work with industry, government, and community partners gives me a unique perspective on the mining workforce. We need to invest in our talent pipeline to reestablish our mineral workforce as an essential component of our economic, energy, and security future. You've heard the stats. In contrast to our number of graduates, China graduates about 3,000 mining engineers every year. Less recognized is the fact that our growing demand for critical minerals will require an innovative interdisciplinary workforce prepared to address complex challenges across the mining value chain, from exploration to production, processing, reclamation, and the broader environmental and social context of mineral production. I'd like to illustrate this complexity with examples from two commodities, nickel and germanium. One strategy to compete with Chinese-controlled nickel production in Indonesia is the opening of new domestic nickel mines, although several of those proposals have faced opposition here in the U.S. There's an opportunity for innovative designs that sequester CO2, improve water quality, and recover all metals so that waste can be repurposed as construction material instead of being stored and monitored in perpetuity. U.S. dependence on Chinese germanium has driven a search for domestic sources that could be used in military equipment, semiconductors, and solar cells. Our group's research suggests that domestic germanium demand could be met by just a few U.S.-based metal mines if we recovered germanium from past and current waste streams. But to do this, we need new characterization methods, efficient recovery technologies, detailed study of the geotechnical, environmental, and social impact of remining materials like tailings, and policies that incentivize both mine waste recovery and byproduct recovery. Both examples depend on a skilled interdisciplinary workforce trained in science, engineering, and social science, and most importantly, systems thinking. We need to grow our mining programs, and we also need to reach out into K-12 and non-mining universities to inspire students to apply their degree paths to solve mining problems. Nationwide, our mining and minerals faculty and staff are a very small workforce ourselves. We discussed that there's no one at home replacing us when we're here today, and we need your support. At Colorado School of Mines, our programs advance a vision for mining of the future that aligns with students' passion for environmental stewardship, innovation, and social impact. We recruit students through K-12 STEM outreach and community college partnerships, and we develop innovative interdisciplinary curricula and field experiences that I teach, immersing students in the complexities of mining and energy transitions on the ground. But these efforts must go beyond individual institutions. We need to coordinate and align our strategic objectives across academia, industry, and government. Policies like the Bipartisan Mining Schools Act are an important step, and the bill would create a grant program to help us recruit students, support our programs, and foster public-private partnerships. I also encourage the committee to consider the creation of a dedicated R&D program on mining. Such a program would help focus the best and brightest minds, students and faculty, on the grand challenge of increased U.S. production that is environmentally sustainable, economically viable, and socially responsible. Thank you to the Select Committee and the Critical Minerals Working Group for recognizing the importance of a skilled mining and mineral workforce in creating robust and secure critical mineral supply chain.
Dr. Holley, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for your perspective. We're now going to Dr. Arnold.
Thank you. Representatives Wittman and Castor, Representative Torres, and staff and guests. Thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding critical minerals workforce development. As mentioned, I am the professor of practice and I chair the mining engineering program at Penn State. I teach mineral processing and conduct research on respirable dust and on critical minerals. I have over 35 years of industry experience in coal and mineral processing, and in 2020, I joined the faculty at Penn State. The mineral industry already faces workforce shortages, and the critical minerals sector will need even more people trained in exploration, mining, processing, metallurgy, and refining. The National Academy's January 2024 workshop report, Building Capacity for the U.S. Mineral Resources Workforce, indicated that the 14 mining engineering programs across the United States collectively graduated only 162 students in 2023, falling far short of the estimated employment demand for 400 to 600 mining engineering graduates per year in the United States. That's current. That's current. And this demand is without that future critical mineral needs. The Society for Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration, the lead U.S.-based mining professional society, funded a PhD fellowship and career grant program that addressed some of the shortage of faculty in our programs. And research funding from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health is also strengthening our programs. SME is producing Jobs of the Future, available on YouTube. Yes, Jobs of the Future, as the mining industry is moving toward a digital future. But I was asked to provide some concrete recommendations to the committee. Number one, and you've mentioned it already, the Senate passed S-912, the Mining Schools Act of 2023, by unanimous voice vote. Please pass the Mining Schools Act to provide funding to support university programs for workforce development. Penn State will propose funding for programs at our Commonwealth campuses to then be extended to community and vocational colleges. How quickly can this program be funded? Number two, duplicate some of the new workforce programs recently announced. The Appalachian Regional Commission just awarded $600,000 to Penn State Silicon Carbide Innovation Alliance for workforce development in the semiconductor industry. Silicon carbide is one of those critical materials that DOE has listed now. Extend these to mineral workforce development. The U.S. Department of Defense recently funded a program at Montana Tech for $5.56 million to develop and deliver mining workforce training in response to the National Defense Industrial Strategy Report published in January that found the labor market lacks the required number of skilled workers to meet defense production demand while driving innovation at all levels. This shortfall is becoming exacerbated as baby boomers retire. End of the baby boomers right here, and younger generations show less interest in manufacturing and engineering careers. They did that from January to August. That was a quick turnaround. U.S. Department of Energy National Energy Technology Lab recently issued a notice of intent, including an area of interest for critical minerals supply chain career awareness outreach program. We are eagerly awaiting that funding opportunity announcement in the fourth quarter of this year. Accelerate this and other similar programs. But how? Number 3, when Congress stopped funding the U.S. Bureau of Mines in 1996, we lost a centralized agency to coordinate U.S. mineral activities. Our reliance on foreign sources of minerals has accelerated, and the number of U.S. mining schools has decreased. When I graduated in 82, there were 25. In 95, there were 20, and now we have 14, maybe a 15th. And the number of U.S. I said already, there will be a call to establish a council in the Executive Office of the President to coordinate critical mineral efforts across departments and agencies. We need an executive-level, unbiased, and fact-based advisor to develop mineral policies and programs. Establish such a council in the executive branch to coordinate and accelerate these efforts. Thank you for allowing me to address you today. Happy to continue the discussion.
Good. Thanks, Dr. Arnold. We'll now go to Ms. Fendley for her perspective from the United Steelworkers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today to represent our members. Our union is the largest mining union in North America. It's a little known fact. We represent both underground and above ground miners extracting and processing a wide variety of minerals and materials. Our members' jobs are high-wage jobs. They are without a doubt hard jobs that are also very necessary jobs to meet the growing demand for critical minerals. So today I wanted to highlight 2 important messages. First is that there are many training pathways to enter the critical minerals workforce. And the second is that the union has been an important partner to helping our members' employers with addressing workforce challenges. Mines and the associated processing are often huge operations, and while these companies need engineers, they need office workers, they also need more workers with blue-collar skill sets. Among the jobs our members do are miners who do general tasks, tradespeople like electricians or mechanics, those with computer skills for mine mapping and blasting, large equipment operators, and process operators. While the jobs needed in existing mining and process operations are largely known, new operations must assess their needs. Given the advancements in technology, the mines and materials processing of the future could look very different from what has existed in the past. When recruiting workers, general workforce readiness training is useful as a screening tool both for the company and for the potential employee to determine suitability for this type of work. These courses include general safety, soft skills, personal protective equipment, and exposure to basic industrial skills. While these general skills are needed, many critical minerals companies conduct their own training of new employees due to the unique nature of each operation, each ore body, each processing technology. And some of our employers do this through apprenticeship programs at the site. Mining companies, in our experience, also utilize outside training partners for specialty skills, working with local community colleges, vocational schools, building trades unions, and even high schools.
In short, no two operations have the exact same training configuration, but all have multiple paths of entry for someone interested in a career in this workforce. In many mines, hiring is a constant process, in part because the workforce is getting older, as we've discussed. Often the only requirements are being 18 years of age, willingness to work as a team, and willingness to work rotating shifts. Although most companies prefer to hire workers with a certificate or a degree or prior relevant experience in the military, other manufacturing, or a trade school. But most mining companies publicly have voiced their goal to hire from the local community, saying that they can train anyone who has an interest and the commitment to work. That said, certain skilled trades are in high demand because all industrial workplaces compete to hire those workers. Our employers right now are currently struggling to hire diesel mechanics, maintenance mechanics, electricians, and process operators. And there are a few other challenges to overcome. The rural location of many of these operations narrows the workforce pool. One policy recommendation that can help with this is the renewal of trade adjustment assistance, which provides retraining support and a moving allowance to relocate for a job. Another major opportunity in workforce recruitment is to put an emphasis on the non-traditional miner by ensuring that workplaces are suited for women, members of the local indigenous community, and others who may have historically seen barriers to working in this industry. And while policymakers should fund training programs and we can work to recruit workers, one of the most important factors for both a company and a prospective employee in this industry is certainty. And it's precisely that concern about global markets and the need for a stable, competitive workforce that has driven the formation of some of our strongest labor management relationships in the industry. Despite these and despite the need to grow domestic capacity, global pressures on critical mineral prices have a strong impact. Our union has discussed the CCP's tactics with this committee in other contexts, so I won't go into detail, except to say that as we are looking to grow critical mineral capacity in the U.S., we need to address those concerns in order to recruit and train a committed workforce. So in closing, the mining and minerals processing workforce requires a diversity of skill sets, many of which can be developed in unique partnerships, and we look forward to working with you on that.
I appreciate that. Thanks for your perspective. I think that workforce elements that all of you all have mentioned are critical. We are at a significant deficit in where we need to be. And Ms. Fendley, I want to begin with you because you bring up some interesting points about certainty. Certainty has to be there for a workforce. And we've seen this in other areas like shipbuilding. You know, you can't drive up the demand, hire a bunch of workers, and then build a bunch of ships, and then 5 years later say we're not going to build any ships or build a much lower number of ships. And that goes to steel and everything that goes into that. United Steelworkers are those shipbuilders. So, but that roller coaster ride. So what happens too is it's not just the company's uncertainty, but as you said, it's worker uncertainty. So they go through the process to train, they get skilled, they practice that in that particular industry. The industry says, by the way, we're going to lay you off for a while, but we'll bring you back once we get another contract or once things come back. And what those workers do is to say, sorry, we're done, we're out, we're not coming back to the industry because we're not going to play the roller coaster ride game. That's one big issue. So you're right. What we have to do is to create, as much as we can, a constant demand signal. And we have to do that in the face of unfair trade practices from China, who look to dump on the market and look to do things to really create an unlevel playing field to give themselves an advantage. Balancing the playing field is key for us to create that level demand. And as Representative Castor and I have talked about, how do we make sure we have that constant demand in things like a national reserve, where we say this is a certain amount that we're going to have for the nation's needs, and it's never going to fall below that. So the companies can say, we know that we're always going to be at that level, and then create other ways for them to protect their investment, things like the ability to have insurance or protect against unfair trade practices, so they know we're going to mine at a constant level, our workforce is going to be constant, and all of a sudden people go, hey, if I have a job there, I can work there for 20, 30, 40 years and retire and not have to worry about the roller coaster ride. Great point. Another element, too, is to make sure, too, that we change how our entire United States views workforce. And unfortunately, through the years, parents and their children looked at it and said, my path to success has to be through a 2 or 4 year degree. Absolutely wrong. What we have to do is to say, we want to make sure that resources that are there today, things like Pell Grants, things like 529 savings accounts, are available to students and their parents for any post-secondary education. So they can get a certification or credential, so they can get into the workforce with that additional skill, so they can be part of this workforce. And again, those students that are experiential learners, those students that love to work with their hands, we need them. And a 2 and 4 year degree is not the path to success for them. My son is a great example. I went to college for a couple of years, came to my wife and I and said, I'm wasting your money. Went to his mom first, and his mom said, well, go talk to your dad. So, but his story is he loved the maritime industry, so he worked as a crew member on a fishing boat, and then worked his way up, went to maritime school, and today has his unlimited license and loves what he does, but didn't need a college education to do it. I, along with Representative Spanberger, have a bill in called the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act, which says let's use 529 savings accounts for any post-secondary education. Give me your perspective on how opening up Pell Grants and 529 savings accounts for students as they come out of high school might be one of those things, in addition to creating the certainty that you speak of, might be a way to help in ensuring that students look at different pathways to success in a career.
I think we need to look at the option on the table to help young people get trained with skills that are usable in their jobs. I mean, to come back to where you started on the demand signal, and not, you can't hire a workforce and then lay them off a few months later. It's also incredibly demoralizing for a worker to go through a training program, get prepared, and in some of these rural communities, this is the employer. They don't have an option to go somewhere else. So I do think that we should be looking at opportunities to help young people finance education in the trades, help them get exposure to industrial skills at a general level. Anecdotally, one of the partnerships that one of our employers has in Montana is with the local FFA. So they are actually doing some soft skills and industrial training with these high school students to get them used to the idea of what a minerals processing workforce looks like, so that it's something that's in their consciousness. I think that we have a lot of work to do, as you said, in helping young people understand that you don't have to go to college, but also work might not look like coming and sitting at a desk every day.
I think that's great. Another thing that always intrigues me are programs like what Micro does with what are called dirty jobs, and to see some of those aspects. But a lot of times, too, it's perception, I think, of parents. And you spoke what I think is incredibly important. That is educating people as to what a job in a mine entails. In that, while some people may think of it as a dirty job, the coal miners that come out with the outline of the mask around them as they come out of the coal mine. But what people have to realize today is that these are highly technical jobs, and they're skilled jobs. So we have to do a better job, too, about educating parents and their children. As many times parents will say to their children, I don't want you working in that realm, not knowing that with today's technology, those jobs are first of all, very desirable. Over a lifetime, they'll probably make more working there than they will with a college degree, and that they are not dirty jobs. There are significant protections there in the workplace to make sure that these are not indeed the quote-unquote dirty jobs. Dr. Holley, let me ask you, because I know that you point out what we need to do in looking at all the different opportunities there in adapting mining technology. And you spoke specifically of how we need to get after these critical minerals and rare earth elements. Give me your perspective about where we are today, because there are kind of two different places in mining. there's a hard rock mining element, and you talk about, which I think is incredibly important, and that is, what about tailings? There are massive amounts of tailings out there from existing mining operations that we ought to be using. And another thing too is when new mining permits are issued, why shouldn't they be dual use permits? So why don't you issue a permit to do critical minerals and rare earth on the same site? Because the tailings can then be used for rare earth. And then two, give me a perspective too on the different types of mining. Mining from placer deposits, alluvial deposits versus hard rock mining. And because those are very, very different, the mining technology, but also a lot of people don't realize, but titanium mining many times is an alluvial deposit mining operation. So, and there's a difference in the permitting process. So, how do we make sure that we are, getting to all those different technologies now? How do we look at the things that we need to do, looking into the future, to cover all the bases?
I'm glad that you've given me an opportunity to talk about geology.
Yes.
I teach probably the only class in the country right now that helps students make the connection between the geological deposit type and the way that mining occurs, mining and processing and refining. And so we look at the different styles of ore and we talk about the opportunities to develop them. Just on Monday, I showed students quite a number of pictures from nickel laterite mining in Indonesia, and we talked about how that ore style is mined by shallow open pits compared to the nickel deposits in the U.S. that are mineable by underground methods with a smaller surface footprint. So I think the connection that you've highlighted is really important. And to me, we need to be making strategic decisions about the deposit styles that we want to mine, because those lead to the type of infrastructure that we need to develop, including the processing infrastructure. And there are a number of opportunities, I think, for shared processing facilities between a number of different deposits in the U.S., and we may be missing some of those. So that's a very important thing for us to think about. You specifically mentioned tailings recovery. My group recently reviewed all of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission filings since 2001. And the number of times that tailings reprocessing has been mentioned, and I mean reprocessing to recover valuable things like critical minerals, is relatively small. And full large-scale operations have been implemented at less than 30 sites around. There is a huge technology gap here in terms of efficiently characterizing this. The analogy that I used a couple of days ago, and I will use it here, is that this is not a charcuterie board where you can go in and pick out the olives. It's a quinoa salad or a smoothie. And so to figure out how much of each thing you have and then how to efficiently recover it. Tailings are wonderful because energy has already been invested in making the particle size small. That's also why they're an environmental and safety concern. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Companies are starting to look at it. We have many partnerships. We have a lot of active research in this area, but we're a long way off from what I would call an aspirational goal of zero waste mining.
We have point because as Representative Castor talked about making sure we create the circle in the production space, so from extraction to final end product, and then back to the recycling side, the same on the extraction side. What are we doing to make sure we get the extraction as a complete circular mode there, and make sure too that when we're issuing a mining permit, that the mining permit is not just for the extraction of the base ore, but also make sure the permit is for extracting other minerals out of the tailings, because I would argue much greater economies of scale to do it all in one place at one time in multiple extraction and refining capabilities versus, leaving a bunch of tailings behind and saying, well, we'll get to that later. We're not in the place in the history of our nation where we can afford to do that anymore. So, Dr. Arnold, let me go to you very quickly. You brought up what I thought was an incredibly important point, and that is how can we get to the point of elevating the issue of critical minerals, rare earth elements, mining, to the point where both the executive branch and the legislative branch are prioritizing this. You talked about some of the efforts within the White House. how do you see the most effective point to get it to a single decision-making point? Because some of the challenges that I know all of us have here is looking at the number of agencies that have been charged with this. So the problem is it's great to say, let's use all these levels of expertise there, but the problem is it generates a lot of information with no action. Give me your perspective on how you best believe that we can take all of this great effort of information, and where do you think the best single point of decision-making to result in action, actually make things happen, could occur?
As I mentioned, Department of Defense is funding things, Department of Energy, NSF, and ARC, everybody is funding things in this space. And it used to be that the Bureau of Mines would be the coordinator.
Yes.
And that, I believe that was part of the Department of the Interior back in the day. Well, SME is going to actually be sending you all information from a group that they put together. Back, I think their meeting was in April, and they're the ones that are going to suggest this council that will sit in the executive office of the president that will actually look at all of this information, coordinate things between the agencies. You know, okay, so Penn State got $600,000 just for silicon carbide, and Montana Tech got $6.36 million for developing workforce. How does all of that work? And, you know, is the Department of Energy managing the Mining Schools Act the best place for that? I don't know, because they might have things that they would like to see done that may not be what everyone else is thinking. And so there really needs to be, the Department of Energy actually has created a critical minerals collaborative as well, back in 2023. And I mean, I'm in the critical mineral research space, and I really only just heard about it this spring. So it's like, are we doing something with this? Are we all being invited to these meetings yet to voice our opinions? Now, they have started having some of these workshops, but there should be people who know what needs to be done already within the U.S. There are leaders at the university campuses, within different agencies. This council idea is going to be, to me, a very important one, unless you just reauthorize the U.S. Bureau of Mines.
To Representative Castor?
Yeah,
Kathy?
thanks.
Yeah.
Dr. Holley, it seemed like you had some insight into what is happening in China and how they're training their workforce on critical minerals. What do you know? What can you share with us?
I know they have many programs and many graduates, and I think finding out more detail has been difficult.
What do you see when you look across the globe? Anecdotally, they say, okay, when they're doing mining in Africa, they take a lot of the Chinese workforce there. But just in broad terms, what do you see along this?
In broad terms, I think that we have challenges competing because the U.S. justifiably has higher standards for labor and environment. And we see that with the way cobalt mining is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, nickel laterite mining in Indonesia, and the example that I gave you. And I also see that not every U.S. community wants a mine in their backyard. And to me, those two problems have the same solution. We have to innovate to do it better. And that's how we will secure American leadership. So I think the opportunity is before us because we are such amazing innovators as a country and we have the ability to do that. This is our challenge.
Insight or impressions when you look across the globe on what China is doing, mining in their workforce?
Well, I actually am the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Preparation and Utilization, and I will tell you most of the articles come to me from China, or from India. There's a smattering of other places, but they're doing a lot of research. They're doing research into ways to sort coal from gangue minerals, that's the waste minerals, even underground. How do you mine it better? And so I get tons of papers on that. And even techniques like cross-flotation, they're doing a lot of work on that. Now, some of the comments that come back are like, did you read this paper and that reference and those sorts of things? But they're still doing the research to actually help with either specific locations or different types of deposits. And so it's interesting that they're the ones that are putting out, and they have tons of universities. I forget how many they have. Every day, I probably, of the 5 or 6 papers I get a day, yeah, they're probably mostly from China.
Okay. You heard a question on kind of the what the executive branch can do to better coordinate. Did you have any thoughts on that? And Ms. Fendley too on how I know DOE with their critical minerals focus and direction right now. But what do you think as the Bureau of Mines is kind of sunsetted and how we should think about organizing across executive branch?
Just have a draft of a paper that includes some recommendations for better coordination across the federal government. It does concern me that there are so many touch points for mining and lack of centralized coordination. I also don't like to see critical minerals buried so far in FECM and DOE. I think that bringing that a couple of levels up would be important. Some of the critiques that we raise in that draft are the way that funding is being awarded by different agencies, particularly for pilot programs and to companies that are planning on doing exploration or building processing facilities. It doesn't seem like all of the agencies that are awarding that funding are talking to one another. And so we are starting to see redundancies and some very clear gaps in our capability to mine and process. So we shouldn't build a whole bunch of processing facilities for one particular ore style and then not mine that ore style or not take advantage of synergies there. That's going to make us weaker. So there needs to be some kind of coordination. I've heard a lot of different suggestions for how that might be put into effect. That's not my expertise, but I will tell you, please coordinate.
Okay. Right. And laboratories, are they, which ones are your go-to touch points?
We probably National Lab. We do some work with NETL. We have NREL right in our neighborhood. And just last week, I helped host 45 researchers from Idaho National Lab, and we identified some upcoming funding opportunities and projects around mine waste recovery mostly. So lots of partnerships. I think those are fruitful collaborations.
And when you send over your paper on coordination, you're going to touch on the national laboratories as well?
I would be happy to include it, although I have not to date.
Okay. What do you think?
I really like the way Dr. Holley put it, that there are so many touch points for critical minerals. That's the perfect phrase for it. To be quite honest, it's daunting and confusing as a worker advocate who's seeking to ensure that projects move forward, that innovation is funded, that workforce is developed. We've certainly heard some of the proposals mentioned today in other spaces around a coordinating body in the Executive Office of the President, around reauthorizing the Bureau of Mines, or maybe something by a different name. At this point, the union has not taken a position on either of those. But I will say, I think what we would love to see from the federal government is a national strategy on mining and how it interplays with our trade strategy, with allies and and others, and how we're really going to meet these needs.
That's a great question. I think if we move towards that national strategy and more coordination across agencies, what is the role of industry? I mean, you have all sorts of industry players out there, and the apprenticeship initiatives and workforce partnerships are vital. Does that just need to be a focus of this national strategy, or are there ways I mean, it's certainly in their interest too, going back to the demand signal that we know we're also going to be working on, but is there something that jumps out at you that we should be focused on, particularly when it comes to the industry partners?
Needs to be part of the concern. Every single mining minerals processing company I speak to says, we're worried, we're in a rural community, and I firmly believe that it's a solvable problem, but we have to put effort into solving it. So any national mining strategy has to be about how we're going to have the workers of all levels to do that. I do think the other piece of this is making sure that we're dealing with the social, which Dr. Holley has raised a few times. I talk with our union, my colleagues in the union in Canada, and there's just such a different attitude about mines. Mines are a really important engine of the economy in many of those communities. They're an important job creator, and I think the community comes to the table with the company in a different way to say, let's figure out how we can do this in a way that we can all live with it.
Some of the larger projects, industry needs to step up to be co-funders to provide some of the co-funding for the projects that DOE or DOD puts out. But, a lot of times they're maybe not as well equipped to understand what they're actually providing the money for. So I don't know, it's a little tricky there.
Really?
Hey, thanks. And sorry. But glad I got to hear some of the questions in the tail end, and what a real delight to be in all of your presence. Ms. Fendley, I, first of all, just am delighted you're here, and it's deeply important to have you at the table and who you represent at the table. And just dovetailing from what my colleague from Florida was asking, can you talk a little bit more about public-private partnerships and how, you're working with industry on articulating some of the workforce needs, and also kind of recognizing some of the constraints that we are coming out of with some of the steel deals that are coming down the pipe, and some views that we have, in part because, we need standards, and we need the best standards for the best workforce in, not just in the country, but in the world. So if we're going to be doing things, we'd be well served to have the leadership of your labor force at the table.
Thank you for the question. There's so much there to unpack, but maybe the thing to say is, I think you need partnerships, both formalized public-private partnerships, partnerships with unions, partnerships with educational institutions, is the only way that we make this work in this country. I also think we have higher standards than the rest of the world, and we need to figure out how to hold the rest of the world to standards that we have. Our
And encourage them to come along.
and encourage them to come
You know,
along.
especially if they're allies, especially if they hear about this, you know, topic at hand in this light. You know, it's not a hard conversation, even for us as lawmakers to have with counterparts in allied nations.
Right. One thing that our union did earlier in the summer was put out a set of pretty high-level principles on what is responsible mining. What should a mining company be doing to be responsible? And in most cases, this is like normal stuff here in this country. But when we had members of our union go visit the nickel mines in Indonesia, they didn't see any of this, right? So crystallizing some of that on paper to say, let's hold people accountable. Let's not trade with people who are with countries, with companies that are not respecting human rights, respecting their community, respecting the environment.
Yeah, and the wage consideration too. Of
course.
You know, and what it's, you know, these aren't just political talking points, like it feels good to say collective bargaining. I mean, that is a reality of a good, strong, solid economy and economic outcomes. And I really see it incumbent on, you know, the work of this committee. I had been in Japan with the committee, and it was actually just one other member. And we were doing some national security, but I kept, again, digging in from Oakland County, so digging on the manufacturing points. And I left that with a direct phone call to Sean Fain at the UAW, inquiring when he was going to go to Japan. And not because it needs to be adversarial, but there's like a way in which we can bring people along and inspire this, particularly as we want to showcase the difference of what it means to have a valued, dignified workforce that is valued for what they bring to the table, unlike frankly what we've uncovered in our committee with Chinese Communist Party and this, you know, challenge that they've posed on the Uyghurs, the genocide that's going on, and the forced labor provisions. I mean, this is a 21st century consideration that is being brought up, and all three of you are directly tied to it. We just take it for granted that we have these ecosystems and that we have these brilliant educators and these strong unions. And so when we look at how to not be the Chinese Communist Party, how not to be Russia, which also, by the way, illegally jails the Chechenes and puts them into slave labor for their economy, you know, this is a bolstering, and this is an opportunity. Of course, we also want freedom here too, and so we have that, and we appreciate that. And I guess the only other thing I wanted to ask is just in terms of, you know, some of our university partners here, and in the upskilling and the pipeline issues and the skills gap and, you know, some of the policies that we need to put into place. I'm in Oakland County, okay, Michigan, well, we got Northern Michigan, we got copper mines, and, you know, we have this kind of rich history, but you were kind of tapping into this, Dr. Holley, in terms of, you know, this isn't picking olives out of the charcuterie board. You know, we've got this whole existing workforce and all these things going on. But how do we avoid a growing skills gap? And how do we maybe get in front of this opportunity that we have here? That's frankly, you know, you mentioned Canada. Well, we love Canada, and we've got the USMCA. And that's a real strong thing. We want this group, we want to go see Canada. We want to double down on what they're doing there and partner and align. But we also want to have it here. We want to have the talents here and keep it here too.
I think a theme here is public-private partnerships. All of my research projects and all of our curricula actually involve collaboration on the ground with the industry so that students are seeing how it happens in real life, and there's a lot of cross-pollination. I think things get better when we work together. We also, at Colorado School of Mines, because we're ranked #1 in the world, we get a lot of international students, and we usually keep them. I've written so many visa letters for our graduates who want to stay, and many of them do end up staying and contributing to our workforce. We also do capacity building in other countries. So, for example, we have partnerships in Latin America. I've contributed curriculum for universities in Kazakhstan, all of whom are looking to the United States for leadership in our mining workforce. So I think all of those are components, those collaborations, learning things from other countries and capacity building for other countries.
So you're national, you know. We've all survived. You know, it is, and it's, you know, and we really salute you for that. That's great. And I know you weren't saying that to brag, but I'm going to brag for you because it's a big deal.
Say this, that our department is so small, and there are so many of whom are nearing retirement. It's very difficult to get people to come and teach in our programs. Industry pays well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But how do we grow our faculty and staff workforce? The recruitment that we have done has been amazing work by individuals, and they may retire.
Hires as faculty are from Africa through our ASETA program. We have a relationship that's been built up over the last 20 years. And so one is actually teaching well, she's not teaching hydrometallurgy yet because our current hydrometallurgist hasn't retired yet, but she's a hydrometallurgist. And so actually involved in a lot of sustainability in mining. And then the other one does a lot of modeling of grinding and those sorts of things. So that's where you get your talent sometimes. I joked that when I was hired, I was the diversity hire, not because I'm a woman, but because I'm an American.
Interesting.
So, so it's a reality. Most of our graduate students are from offshore. We do have a few domestic grad students, but it's hard to get them to want to stay when their starting salary in aggregates is $75,000 a year. So it's a little tough. That's a little tough to say, oh yeah, stay in grad school, be poor for 3 or 4 years. So, but it's something it's a reality. It's a reality. But on the outreach side, we've had a mining summer camp for the first time. And, we're going to do some work with the College of Engineering to get them to come to our extractive minerals or extractive industries career fair, because we don't have that many students in mining. But we're hoping to, when the mining companies come in, they'll get interested in hiring the mechanical engineering or chemical engineering students. And then those students will come back and say, hey, maybe I should take a class in mining. So.
Well, we just think about our workforce development strategies, and I've been seeking these for a long time in the manufacturing industrial sector. And it's an Uncle Sam moment. I mean, it's we want you, and we need to really think about where we're kind of aligning some of our strategies and as we're moving forward. And again, I really salute you, Mr. Wittman, for having this session today, because if we care so deeply about minerals, we're not doing it without the workforce.
I agree. Great points here, and I want to make sure I get to Kathy real quickly. But Dr. Holley, I think you bring up a great point in answer to Haley's point about, how do we utilize the relationships we have with friendly nations around the world? There's a lot of amazing technology there. I'm part of the American-Australian Legislative Dialogue. I've been to Australia, especially been to the Adelaide area. It's amazing to me. If you look at the economy in Australia in the past decade, their mining operations there have been incredible. Their technology is incredible. A lot of times, too, we're our own worst enemy there. We have things like CFIUS. It says we can't trade information. The problem is when we're not willing to trade information with another country, they're not willing to trade with us. The good news with Australia is we have the AUKUS agreement, and Pillar 2 there allows us to trade an awful lot of critical information. their mining technology, especially as it relates to mining techniques and equipment, the heavy equipment usage and manufacture there. And by the way, we're not in that space anymore here in the United States. So even if you have the technical expertise, the question is who's going to manufacture the equipment to actually execute a plan on scale. So give me your perspective. You talk about those international relationships and making sure too that we have the academia to academia exchanges and making sure too that we have students that not only come here. Listen, I'm a believer that we have two systems that are very workable systems on the student visa front, the immigration front, the H-1 and H-2 programs. Unfortunately, we make them to where they're inoperable almost with very, very low quotas there. So we keep people from coming in. And to me, we talk a good game. We talk about STEM. We want all these science, technology, engineering, and math graduates to be in the workforce. So when those students come here from other nations and we say, gosh, we'd like for you to stay, guess what we do? We deport them. We deport them. Why don't we stapling a green card to every diploma that we issue to a graduate in an area that we need them here in the United States? I mean, that ought to be a place where everybody can agree on immigration reform and those things. I mean, other countries are saying, we need you, we want you, instead of us going, no, we want to send you away. And so we attract those graduates, or we attract those students, I should say, and then we cast them off. And then, two, we look at opportunities where I just got back from Scandinavia. It's amazing what's going on in Finland and Sweden and what they're doing in mining technology. These are our friends. These are our friends. And we have to do more with our friends because this is an international problem, especially with the aggressive and what I call anti-American / anti-believers in the rule of law and human rights and human dignity and protection of the environment. I mean, they're counter to everything that we believe in. And yet, we buy materials from African mines, where 16 of the 18 mines are run by the Chinese, who use forced labor, and they destroy those countries and their environment. To me, that'll be a wake-up call. And I'll say, hey, what are we doing with our international friends? What are we doing to combine ourselves together to force out China? Because China's been pretty insidious. They're doing it in South America right now. Look at what they're doing in South America. Luckily, Venezuela's standing up, but others need to stand up and go, no, you're not coming in. I'm worried about what they're doing in Brazil. You talk about rainforest, but you wait until they go in there and start to open pit mine in the rainforest areas. I mean, they are going to go in these countries for their own benefit and destroy them, and they're going to leave the aftermath in there. Anyway, I know I've gone on a rant, but anyway, your perspective on what we can do to create better relationships with our international friends that are symbiotic relationships, that are not exploitative relationships. China is a transactional coercionist. They look to exploit other countries. They don't give a rip about those countries. They will exploit human beings. They'll exploit their resources. They'll destroy the environment, and then they'll leave. So anyway, I'm sorry, I've been on my soapbox. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
I heard about keeping international students, international partnerships, and for both R&D and production.
Yeah.
And I think all are absolutely essential. For me, as a researcher, it's about the incentives to do that research and make those partnerships and make them last. And that is funding and access to really exciting projects. And those exciting projects are what draw the students, and that's what keeps them here. The ability to pay them to do those projects is absolutely essential as well. I think we need to be collaborating on research with our allies. We also need to be looking strategically at the kinds of deposits that everybody has in their portfolio, sort of using a geologic systems approach to understand what the opportunities are. When you talk about cobalt, most of the world's terrestrial cobalt is in the DRC, but there are other cobalt deposits, some in Idaho, similar ones in Australia, and we have not collaborated on how to process those. So those kinds of partnerships are going to be essential.
From our coal mines in Pennsylvania, and we're working on separating that out as well. So that's one of the big projects that we have ongoing with the pilot plant next phase, starting soon. But it's those partnerships, that the memorandums of understanding that we put together with different universities. We're working with universities in Kazakhstan right now, more on the innovation side of things, how they can commercialize their projects. Penn State has this huge innovation center that holds all sorts of entrepreneurs, and so they want to come over and investigate how they can duplicate that kind of effort in Kazakhstan, taking their university research and expanding it out into the out into the commercialization space. So we're working on a proposal for that right now. So to put together just a small collaboration that Penn State and Kazakhstan have already, that we're going to put in a proposal to do that very thing. But other places in the world as well. Saudi Arabia, of all places. So they want a mining school there. Like, okay, but you do petroleum and natural gas really well. So it's like, how can we work on exchanging curriculum, those types of things. So it's a global, and the mining companies from Sweden, Epiroc and such, I mean, they've got all sorts of technology that we use here in mining. So, it's very cool stuff.
We exchange with countries that believe in the same protection, human rights, that's the way you counter the subversive efforts by China. Anyway, Ms. Fendley?
Well, that's exactly the point to make.
Coordinating on those, I'll use the word standards, even though maybe I don't mean formal standards. It is the way to get a lot of this done. There are important government partnerships, but there are also partnerships outside of government that are important to think about. And, our union is part of a network of mining unions around the world, where we share information about technologies. We share information about challenges that we're having with global crisis or China's activities, or where some of the big guys, the big mining companies are behaving differently in different parts of the world. And that has been a really fruitful place for us to raise many of these issues jointly with the mining industry, as miners from all over the world.
You all have really helped crystallize the challenges and some of the opportunities. Thank you. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think before we leave today, you should share with us? Otherwise, I'll look forward to beyond your testimony. Now you can go back and ask colleagues and maybe ask some of the students and apprentices what they recommend and send that back to us. Anything? Okay.
A very good one. Thank our witnesses. And some great takeaways as we look forward to getting the paper from the work group there about some of your suggestions. Dr. Arnold, Dr. Holley, you talked too about having a single point. You talk about a lot of touch points, but really no decision-making point. I think you also create a string to tie that together, and that is, we have a national defense strategy that has pieces of this. Why don't we have a national mining strategy? I think that too. Representative Castor and I are working on some legislation on things like national reserves, some of those concepts. I think this works perfectly into just that sort of concept. How do we make sure we have an all-of-government approach instead of a multiple touch-point approach? And the challenge with multiple touch-points is everybody does a lot of good work, but everybody says, well, I'm going to give you the information, but it's not our decision. It's somebody else's. So you got to have a single point of responsibility. So those are great points for us to take away from this. And please, as you continue these efforts, whether it's on the workforce side, the labor side, to give us your perspective too on how we build a workforce and maintain it, and make sure too that we separate ourselves from countries like China, what we do to support our workers, what we do to support the environment and protect our workers and protect the environment. Those things are critically important. That's what makes us different than China. Rule of law, human rights, environmental protection, that's what we stand for. That's what other nations who believe in what we believe in ought to be working with us. That's the way you counter China and other nations that don't believe in those things. And then two, what do we do as you all continue to develop the science to make sure that the science informs the public policy. I'm a scientist by training, and through all my educational experience, I'm one that really focuses on connecting science to public policy. I wish I could tell you it happens here at the frequency that it should, but we want to make sure it happens more often here with science and public policy. So I'd love to continue to get your perspective on that and the things that you see, especially as these issues emerge. Let us know. Stay in touch with our staffs. We are keenly interested in your perspective and the things that we can do to either help or get out of the way. So we want to make sure we do this. There you go. Yeah, I know. Well, that's definitely a part of this. We talk about all the processes, and listen, we need to protect the environment. A lot of discussion about NEPA. NEPA's not saying do away with NEPA, but I'm saying how do we refine it? And Dr. Holley, you pointed this out. How do we refine it to make sure we're doing the things that are necessary, but not in ways that interfere with us being able to use these resources? I think there's incredible technology that we have developed here that let us use those resources. Let us do it responsibly. And I love your holistic approach to saying maybe the geology ought to drive a lot of this. Maybe, and again, that goes right back to let's let science drive this. Let's look at the deposits and say, how do we match the geology to the technology to the policy and then get it right? So anyway, I love how you all have put that in perspective, and we want to make sure we're following up on that. So please stay in touch with us. Let us know your perspective on things, because good public policy comes from dialogue like we have today and making sure that we follow up on this. And I can assure you that Kathy and I will absolutely do that. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.